Everyone wants to buy compact SUVs, but what if you make them fully loaded? That's these two, the Hyundai Tucson Limited and the Nissan Rogue Platinum. Both of them, for around 40 grand, deliver a lot of nice features inside, ton of technology, and some unique powertrains. I will compare all of them, show you how roomy they are, how practical they are, and why you just might consider either of these versus a luxury SUV. The Rogue is the third best-selling compact SUV in the United States. The Tucson, number 5. We've already compared this Tucson against the Ford Escape, and now it's against a new refresh Rogue for 2024. Both of them are roughly the same amount of years into the respective generations, and they're practically the same size and the same cargo capacity. But besides those all-important characteristics, how do they actually drive, and how do they feel? For 2024, the Rogue gets a refresh, a new front grille with thin chrome lines. It hides that V-shaped outer grille of previous Rogue and other Nissan models. To my eyes, this looks more like the more expensive and larger Pathfinder. And on the Platinum trim, you get new 19-inch wheels. It really looks good. There's new bumper cutouts in the front too. The Rogue has been one of the most popular SUVs on sale, and it's definitely looking nice and dressy, and I think that it's not overwrought really in any way. The thin LEDs up top are also a nice touch, not quite as outrageous as what you'll find on that Tucson, but something that I think is gonna age rather well. It already has. It's been around for several years. The Rogue is rather conventional and rather forgettable in a parking lot, but in this color and this trim, you're getting some nice features, like black fender surrounds, bigger 19-inch wheels. The whole car just looks more elevated versus the Rogue on the standard 17-inch tires. I'll give the hand to Hyundai for having the coolest DRLs. Right here in this dark chrome grille, those are all lights, but they're not headlights. That treatment is done better than the Rogue, which also has DRLs on top and headlights below. This fascia, definitely unique. I like the 19-inch wheels that kind of look like saw blades to me. But not every design detail in the Tucson is built to last. And here's what I mean. All of these creases. Kind of cool that you can stamp a door panel that way, but it doesn't mean that you should. To me, the Tucson and the Elantra sedan that also wears this look, it looks like it's been hit more than a few times. It's like someone that has a car and doesn't want to fix it and they drive around like that, but that's actually how this car comes brand new. I'm not a fan, maybe you would be, but the rest of the profile is a handsome, rugged-looking SUV. There's a few unconventional elements on the back of the Tucson. Just like the side of the car, there's some textured stampings in the lower part of the bumper. Even the taillights coming from that thin LED strip, they kind of look like shark teeth jutting down. And the Hyundai logo is imprinted on that glass. It is not a traditional emblem. Over on the Rogue, it's definitely more traditional, more square. But for 2024, Nissan has classed it up, especially on this Platinum trim. They've gotten rid of that matte gray plastic on the back of the bumper, made it more body color, reduced some of the black body cladding. So this car, I think, overall is gonna look better in the long term, but what do you think? I don't know, I just like this one. Let's talk dimensions. The Tucson has a 2-inch longer wheelbase. It's also an inch wider. The Rogue is just under an inch longer overall, and it's over 2 inches taller. Very similar, and so are the ground clearances, between 8.2 and 8.3 inches. Hyundai and Nissan go two very different routes when it comes to powertrains. On the Tucson, it's a 2.5-liter inline-4. On the Nissan, a downsized and turbocharged inline-3. Look at the numbers. It's the Nissan that's posting more horsepower and more torque on regular grade fuel. But if you step over to the Tucson, you can also get hybrid and plug-in hybrid options on this very same car, and we've reviewed those cars separately. Check out those reviews. Now come back to the fuel economy, because with these engines, it's the Rogue that pulls ahead. This car cannot even crack 30 on the EPA highway cycle. For transmissions, it's a CVT, and on the Tucson side, 8-speed automatic transmission. Both of these cars come as front-wheel drive as standard, all-wheel drive is optional across all trims, and towing, the Hyundai has a slight advantage over the Nissan, but let's face it, you're not using a compact crossover to tow anything heavy. This brown interior is very classy, it feels upscale, and it's a new color for 2024. And even with the pano moonroof, there's an inch of extra headroom and the same legroom as the Tucson. The Rogue has the more traditional layout with more buttons and switches. And the switches that you touch feel better, like the windows and the gear selector, which is so much easier to use than that in the Tucson. And I do like the interior materials just a bit better, even if it's not quite as visually interesting. If you got big bags or purses, they can go right underneath this center console. Now the front passenger seat is only 4-way power. The Tucson is 8-way, but there's an extra airbag right here on this left bolster. It's a side airbag to protect the driver and the passenger in a collision from colliding with each other, and very few automakers even offer that. Features you get on the Tucson Limited that you don't get on the Rogue Platinum. Power up and down front windows. Small feature, but it really is useful. Cooled front seats, and an 8-way front power passenger seat versus the 4-way system in the Rogue. While the materials aren't as great as the Rogue, the interior design is certainly a standout. The way the air vents wrap around the doors, the 4-spoke steering wheel, and even the fabric trim across the dash. It does look good. But these seats, while they look very comfortable, are not very supportive. There's not a lot of bolstering. They also sit up higher, and Hyundai's push-button selector for the gears is confusing. There's more plastic inside the Tucson, and the materials aren't quite up to the standard in that Nissan, especially right here where this material, this vinyl, it's very rough. The back door on the Rogue, it opens almost 90 degrees. It makes loading and unloading, and if you put car seats in here, so much easier. Most SUVs don't do that. Even though there's 3 inches of fewer legroom than the Tucson, doesn't really feel that back here. The headroom is equal, and there's also a 3rd zone climate that's optional on this Rogue Platinum, but it's not available on the Tucson. There's a really important safety feature that's now standard for 2024 on the Tucson. It's rear side-mounted airbags on either side, and also seatbelt pretensioners and force limiters that are on the outboard seats. But this has a very nice recline. The great thing about both these SUVs, they have a lot of cargo space. The Tucson has the slight edge over the Nissan when it's behind the second row, but when everything's folded, both of them are 74 cubic feet. The Rogue has a practical feature. It's called divide and hide, and that means when you put stuff back here, you can lift up this panel, it locks in place. This might seem like it's rudimentary, but it's really nice because you don't have to order an accessory dealer cargo box or anything of the sort. Now, previous Rogues had a more advanced system. They had some rail systems up here where you could kind of have this as a partial shelf or close this off. But if you look deeper inside here, you're gonna find carpeted sidewalls, and that truly is a very nice upgrade over other SUVs. There's a 12.3-inch touchscreen on the SL and Platinum trims of the Rogue, and it's running Google OS. So that means native maps with live traffic, all of Google's really good search technology, assistant. Take me to the CarGurus headquarters, which I don't need to go to today, but hey, it's listening to me, and it's very fast. As good as the Hyundai is, it doesn't have this type of technology. And also, it has better cameras. Not only can I see the front, of course, and the sides with the wheels very nicely, Nissan also has a new 360-degree view from the outside. Luxury automakers have had this for years, and now it's here. I truly do like this, although you can't use it when the car's in reverse. It's only when you're stationary or going forward. The Rogue also has Sirius XM 360L, which means it has even more channels, really a ton more channels than normal. It goes up to like 3,000, 700, I don't know, but there's way more features on here, way more music. The Hyundai does not offer that. And it's also USB-C only, so if you have USB-A devices, you will not be able to use them in the Rogue without an adapter. And Nissan Connect, which is their telematics system, is now complimentary for 3 years. Hyundai includes it for basically the life of the entire car. So this one you'll have to pay for. And it also has a digital key that lets you use your phone to unlock and start the car, and that is a dealer accessory. The Rogue's instrument panel is definitely better than the Tucson's, and by that, I mean I can see live maps right on the screen. And if I want to change the view to kind of expand it, the gauges look crazy there, but it's really nice. There's just more functionality. It's easier to browse all of these settings and view your driver assistance here, really amplifying these things, making them larger, making them easier to read. This is what makes an instrument panel so useful. Nissan's done a great job here. The Tucson has a 10.25-inch touchscreen. It does not have wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. It requires a cable and it's USB-A only. So if you have USB-C devices, you can't use them. Gotta have an adapter. Maps are included here, 3 years of map updates. I do like that. It's easy to use. These icons, not quite so easy to see all the time because at the same colors, same shapes, at speed, it's tougher. But if you go back here, Blue Link, this is included with every single Tucson and it's included for the lifetime of the car. There's no subscription necessary to see vehicle diagnostics or the telematics on your smartphone. And a digital key is also available. On this trim, it's included. This row of touch capacitive buttons, including for volume, not my favorite, but it's at least here. Very easy to read as well. And there's also a hard button for the cameras. Doesn't have quite the same amount of features as the Nissan, but still quite a lot of views, and it's clear. I do like that. And you also get Smart Park Assist. That's really a gimmick. You can watch our other reviews on Hyundai and Genesis models to see that. It's fun, but truly not really a class-leading feature that you'd actually use. The Tucson has a smaller digital instrument panel, and as such, it doesn't show quite as much information and there's less customization. You do have some driver assist view setups here. Not really great for navigation. All you get is this. Of course, when the navigation's active, there's arrows, and all it does really is animate a little differently in the different drive modes. The best feature though, and the redeeming quality here, blind spot views, left and right. This is really a lifesaver and a great feature. For a little 3-cylinder engine, actually punching above its weight. I think it sounds better. It's not thrashy, it's more muted at every speed. And it responds better. There's no gears on the Rogue. This is a continuously variable transmission. There's also paddle shifters, just like the Hyundai, with 8 virtual ratios. And I think the response here, despite there being no gears, is just better. The extra torque off the line is definitely noticeable versus the Tucson. The Tucson really requires you to rev it a lot higher, like past 5,000 RPM to get going. And the Rogue, you don't really have to do that. To my ears, the Rogue is the quieter car. It's more hushed. This feels more Infiniti-like to me than that Hyundai Tucson. Less wind noise, less tire noise, just more relaxed. Even with traffic all around me, I just feel this is the comfier car. Nissan's Pro Pilot Assist is on every Rogue except the base model. That means it can do self-steering, adaptive cruise, all that stuff. And these top trims go a little further. Nissan calls it Pro Pilot 1.1, and it syncs with the navigation so it can automatically slow the vehicle down when it's approaching turns or different speed limits. That's pretty nice. And effectively, it works just as nice as the Tucson. The only difference is this has a better driver information display. It's wider, so I can see what's around me. And this car also has a head-up display that also projects that information on the windshield. What I notice first when I take the Rogue on a back road is that I'm sitting lower. I'm not even at the lowest seating position. Just getting in and out of the Rogue feels like I'm sitting a bit lower, which I like. This is still an SUV, it's not a sedan. But to me, this drives more like the smaller Sentra, which is a very good thing. Watch our reviews of that car. That's what I think that the Rogue is more patterned after. Because even though it's tall, it doesn't feel like it. I like this. And in the normal driving mode, the steering just has a really good weight. It's not overly light like the Tucsons in the normal mode. I find myself having to make a few tiny corrections, but the feel of it, I actually like a little bit more. I'm also not put off by the engine note. It's amazing that a 3-cylinder, which is inherently very imbalanced, sounds this decent. I'm just impressed, especially for a vehicle of this size. Turbo 3. It's got more response, way more response coming out of corners. when you need to get the Rogue moving, it's moving a lot quicker than that Tucson. It's responding to your input better. And truly, around these same turns, I just feel like, yeah, I definitely feel like I'm not tossing around as much. Like my body and my head is not wobbling around. I think that's truly a matter not just of the chassis and the suspension tuning, and they're both wearing equally sized tires, 19 inches in diameter. I do think it's because of the height that I'm sitting at, and that truly does make a difference for the center of gravity, is where that is. I think on the Rogue it's positioned a bit lower, and I can feel that. Well, if you're looking for pure fun in turns and back roads, neither of these SUVs are going to work, but they're not intended to. And the Rogue, for braking, I actually prefer the Tucson's because it's just firmer. This one is a little too spongy, and it's kind of counter to how the steering and the handling feel. A little bit of a disconnect, but not terrible. The Tucson is a lot louder and grittier. And when you get up to speed, it's also just louder in the interior. Tire noise, wind noise are amplified versus the Rogue. It's not something you notice if you're just driving only the Tucson, but when you start to compare a bit, these things jump out at you. I also don't like how this 8-speed automatic shifts. It actually acts more like a CVT than the actual CVT in that Rogue. Weird, it really just seems to peg it at the revs, and even though I'm jumping on the throttle, I don't really get any feeling of momentum, but I get a lot of noise. I will say this is a lot better than the base engine in the Toyota RAV4. You can check out that review, because that one was really bad. Totally. So Hyundai's engine, certainly a lot better for a naturally aspirated 4. But in terms of noise, vibration, harshness, and response, it's the Nissan that wins there. This top grade of the Tucson has highway driving assist, and that means it will self-steer in certain situations with the adaptive cruise control on. And you can also set how aggressive that is from the touchscreen with different settings, which I like. Essentially, it works just like the Nissan. I don't think either one is above the other. They're both equally pretty decent. Ride composure is overall pretty good. It soaks up bumps. There's decent feedback on the steering. It's slightly looser in the normal mode than the Rogue is in normal mode, so I prefer the Rogue there. But when you put this in sport, it adds some more weighting, which I almost wish this was the default setting, but it's not. And even so, it doesn't really race the transmission programming either, so sometimes sport is kind of the way to go. Driving on a back road, though, I feel like there's a little bit more head toss. I feel like I'm moving around a bit more. The seats to me are not quite as snug, and the driving position does feel higher to me. I definitely feel more SUV-like than the Rogue. My seating position as far down as it can go. And while the Tucson is not rolling that much, it truly isn't, I just feel like I'm moving more from side to side. I feel more connected and secure in the Rogue. This is just more of a traditional SUV experience. Still feels sure-footed. Steering is, like, really, it's placing the car really well. But I just feel like this. I feel like I'm moving a bit more than I would prefer. But if you keep the Tucson straight and you're not accelerating hard, it's generally pretty quiet. It's just that when you're on the highway and when you're trying to pass, that's when the noise creeps in, and that's when it feels less refined, a lot less refined than the Nissan. So in terms of driving performance, the Tucson, not all that fun. Even though it corners pretty decently. But I will give it this, for braking feel, it definitely one-ups the Rogue. It's a little bit more consistent too, through the pedal travel. The 2024 Nissan Rogue starts at $28,850. There's 4 trims. The Platinum all-wheel drive that you see here, with dealer accessories like illuminated door sills and ground lighting, a frameless rear-view mirror, $45,650, including destination. The 2024 Hyundai Tucson starts at $27,500. There's 4 trims, plus 4 hybrids and 2 plug-in hybrids. As tested, the Limited with all-wheel drive, $40,315 with floor mats, white paint, and destination. Hyundai and Nissan are having their glow-up moments. Exterior design, interior quality, technology, the way they drive, both of these cars are significantly better than their predecessors were just a generation ago. But it's the Rogue that truly surprises me because it has a 3-cylinder engine that you wouldn't expect to be good, but it is. The interior is better. The way the car's dynamics are better. That's something I wouldn't have ever said about a Rogue in previous generations. But this car, from the refinement to the cargo capacity, which is the same as the Hyundai's, dollar for dollar, even though this one's slightly more, if you remove some of those dealer accessories, you're getting a better car. And truly, this car feels like it's elevated into another class than that Tucson. But what do you think? These cars are very, very comparable in almost every metric possible, and we've got plenty of other SUV comparisons on our YouTube channel. So go watch them, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.